Most people believe they are struggling because they don't have enough money, not enough opportunities, or not enough luck. That's the story they've been told their entire lives, and over time, it starts to feel like the truth. You look at your situation, your income, your limitations, and it seems obvious that the problem is external. If you just had more resources, more support, or better timing, everything would be different. But what if the real problem isn't what you have, but how you think? What if the limitation isn't your reality, but the way your mind has been shaped to see that reality? Because the uncomfortable truth is this: most people are not poor by accident. They are programmed to stay that way. This programming doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come from a single place. It builds slowly, layer by layer, starting from the moment you begin to understand the world. As a child, you were not taught how money really works. You were taught how to behave around it. You were taught to be careful, to be safe, to avoid risk, to follow a path that has already been approved by others. Study hard, get good grades, find a stable job, and everything will work out. That message sounds responsible, even logical, but hidden inside it is a very specific way of thinking, one that prioritizes security over growth. And once that idea settles into your mind, it starts to shape every decision you make. You begin to associate safety with success. You start believing that avoiding failure is more important than pursuing opportunity. You choose paths that feel predictable, even if they don't feel meaningful. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to build a life that is optimized not for freedom, but for stability. On the surface, that doesn't seem like a problem. Stability feels necessary. It feels like progress. But over time, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a boundary. Because when your thinking is centered around safety, you stop exploring anything that exists outside of it. You don't take risks that could lead to growth because they feel uncertain. You don't question systems that seem to be working because they provide comfort. And you don't challenge your own limitations because they feel familiar. This is where the programming becomes powerful. Not because it forces you to stay in one place, but because it convinces you that staying there is the right decision. If you look closely at how most people approach money, you'll start to see the pattern. They work hard, they earn a salary, they try to save a portion of it, and they repeat this cycle for years. It feels productive, it feels responsible, and it feels like progress. But despite all that effort, their situation doesn't change significantly. Their income might increase slightly, their lifestyle might improve a bit, but the overall structure remains exactly the same. They are still trading time for money and still dependent on a system that requires their constant participation. And the reason this pattern continues is not just because of external circumstances, but because of internal conditioning. Most people are never taught to think in terms of assets, leverage, or systems that can generate value without direct effort. Instead, they are taught to rely on income that comes from time. The more you work, the more you earn. And while that seems fair, it creates a limitation that is almost impossible to escape. There are only so many hours in a day, and once those hours are filled, your ability to grow becomes restricted. But instead of questioning that structure, most people accept it, not because they have no choice, but because they don't see an alternative. Their thinking has been shaped in a way that makes the current system feel like the only system. This is what programming looks like in real life. It's not obvious, it's not forced, it's subtle, consistent, and deeply embedded. It shows up in the way you think about risk, the way you react to opportunity, the way you define success, and the way you measure progress. It influences your decisions without you even noticing it, and over time, it creates a version of reality that feels completely normal, even if it is limiting. One of the clearest signs of this programming is how people react to the idea of doing something different. The moment you consider stepping outside of the traditional path, your mind starts generating reasons why it might not work. It tells you it's too risky, too uncertain, too complicated. It reminds you of what you could lose instead of what you could gain. And because those thoughts feel logical, you listen to them. But those thoughts are not neutral. They are the result of years of conditioning. They are designed to keep you within a system that values predictability over possibility. This doesn't mean that everyone should take extreme risks or abandon everything they are doing. That's not the point. The point is to recognize that your current way of thinking might not be entirely your own. It might be influenced by systems, environments, and beliefs that were never meant to help you grow beyond a certain level. And once you start to see that, something begins to shift. You begin to question assumptions that once felt obvious. You start to notice patterns in your own behavior. You become aware of the decisions you make automatically without thinking. And that awareness is where change begins, not in action, but in perception. Because before you can change your situation, you have to change how you see it. If you continue to see money as something that only comes from effort, you will always be limited by how much effort you can give. If you continue to see risk as something to avoid, you will never explore opportunities that require it. If you continue to define success as stability, you will never push yourself towards something greater. And this is why the shift is psychological before it is practical. You don't escape the system by working harder within it. You escape it by understanding how it works and choosing to interact with it differently. You begin to think in terms of leverage instead of effort, in terms of value instead of time, and in terms of long-term outcomes instead of short-term comfort. And that doesn't happen instantly. It takes time to unlearn patterns that have been built over years. It requires you to be patient with yourself, to observe your own thinking, and to gradually replace limiting beliefs with more expansive ones. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. You might feel uncertain, even confused, because the ideas you once relied on no longer feel as solid. But that discomfort is part of the process. It's a sign that your perspective is changing and that you are beginning to see beyond the boundaries that once defined your thinking. And as that perspective expands, so do your possibilities. You start to notice opportunities that you would have ignored before. You begin to understand concepts that once seemed complicated, and you see connections between effort, value, and outcomes in a completely different way. And slowly, your actions begin to align with this new way of thinking. Instead of focusing only on earning money, you start thinking about how to create it. Instead of relying solely on your time, you begin exploring ways to separate your income from your hours. Instead of seeking comfort, you begin to value growth. And these shifts might seem small, but over time they compound. They change how you spend your time, how you use your energy, and how you structure your life, creating momentum not through sudden breakthroughs, but through consistent changes in direction. And that's what makes this process so powerful. It's not about a single decision that changes everything. It's about a series of small decisions that gradually move you away from the patterns that were holding you back. Most people never reach this point, not because they're incapable, but because they never question the programming they've been given. They accept it as reality, as something fixed and unchangeable. And as long as they do that, their situation remains the same. But once you see it, once you recognize that your thinking has been shaped in a specific way, you can begin to reshape it. You can choose what to keep and what to let go. You can decide which beliefs actually serve you and which ones limit you. And you can start building a mindset that is aligned not with safety, but with possibility. And that's where real change begins. Because at that point, you are no longer reacting to the system. You are understanding it. You are no longer following a path without questioning it. You are actively choosing your direction. And that doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means everything becomes intentional. You still face challenges, you still experience uncertainty, and you still need to put in effort. But now that effort is directed differently. It is no longer just about maintaining your current position. It is about moving beyond it. And over time, that shift creates a completely different kind of life. One where your income is not limited by your time, where your decisions are not controlled by fear, and where your potential is not defined by the environment you started in. But none of that is possible until you recognize the truth. You were never just lacking money. You were operating within a system of beliefs that kept you thinking small. And the moment you start to break that system, even slightly, everything begins to change. Because you're not just changing what you do, you're changing how you think. And once your thinking changes, your entire reality begins to follow.